Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda and today I have for you my N.E.W.T.s TBR. This is the second round of the N.E.W.T.s. I participated last year and I am participating again this year. If you're unfamiliar with what the Magical Readathon is as a whole or what the N.E.W.T.s are, I will leave a link down below in the description box with G's N.E.W.T.s announcement video that also has all of the links and information about and a frequently asked question page about what these readathons are. So I'm really excited to be participating this year. When I sat my OWLs in April, I decided that I was either going to pursue a career as a herbologist or as a magizoologist, and I decided that for the N.E.W.T.s I'm going to focus on a career as a magizoologist. So for this, the readathon lasts from August 1st to August 31st. I believe there is a hashtag for this readathon, though it wasn't in G's announcement video, but I assume it's going to be the N.E.W.T.s Readathon 2019, since this year the Owls hashtag was Owls Readathon 2019. But I'm not 100% sure, though I do know people have been posting on Instagram with this. So in order for me to be able to pursue a career as a magizoologist, I have to get an outstanding in care of magical creatures, an exceeds expectations in charms, and exceeds expectation in herbology. So that means I need to read a total of 7 books, right? So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 books. So I do have my TBR picked for those 7 prompts that I do need to complete, but I also went a little above and beyond and picked a book for every single other prompt for a total of 36 books, I believe it is. If there's 12 subjects times 3, it's 36, yes. So I'm going to share with you the books that I plan to read to complete my N.E.W.T.s for Magizoologist, and then I'll show you what other books I have planned to read for the rest of the time. I didn't print out the Hogwarts letter explaining what each prompt is, so I don't have the full explanation of them, just kind of like a short and condensed version. But in that video that I'm going to link down below of G's, it will have a link to the Google Docs so that you can print the career guidebook and also the letter for taking your N.E.W.T.s. So first subject, we'll just go with care of magical creatures. That's the one that I have to hit all 3 levels in. So the acceptable level is to read a book with a title that starts with A, and this is A for Aragog, the giant spider. So for that, I plan to read Adrift by Tammy Oldham Arshcraft. And this is basically the story of Tammy and her fiance or husband at the time. They went sailing and went into a big storm and basically had to float around the ocean for like 37 days, I want to say, and survive. So this is kind of telling the story of that, and it's a 1-word title. Adrift is the first letter. It's an A, so it fits perfectly. The next prompt for Exceeds Expectations is to read a book with fewer than 300 pages. And for that, I am going to jump into my first ever manga, and this is Vampire Knight Volume 1 by Mitsuri Hino. I have never read a manga before, and I found the first 4 of these at my local half-price books for like $2 a piece, so I figured it was the perfect way to get into manga by being able to pick them up so inexpensively. But basically, it's about these kids that attend a school. There are 2 different classes in the school, so you've got the day class and the night class, and the day class is protected from the night class, which is full of vampires. So as the title implies, there's going to be vampires, and this is under 200 pages. I want to say it's like 180 something. So I'm hoping to fly through this rather quickly. And then for the outstanding prompt, it's to read a book with a bird on the cover. And for this, I am doing a reread of Fallen Kingdoms. This is the first book in the Fallen Kingdoms series, and there is a falcon on the cover there. I read up to book, I want to say 4 on audiobook, before I realized that it was an incomplete series. And so I put it down until the final book was published, and then I bought all of them in paperback. I really enjoyed the audiobook versions, but I wanted to read them as paperback as well. So I'm planning to kind of read quite a few of them throughout this readathon, because they will be rereads, so I should get through them pretty quickly. But basically it's there's 3 different lands, all with varying political things going on. You've got Aranos, Limeros, and Pelsia. I can't remember how these are pronounced. But you've got basically warring nations, or what is going to be warring nations, and you've got political families coming together, overthrowing one another, and arranged marriages happening, and other fun things. I know Paige over at Creating and Co. described this as a CW show in book form and like fantasy form, and I guess in a way it kind of is. But I just remember liking these books, so I would like to finish out the series. So for charms, the acceptable prompt is to read a book with a gorgeous cover. Obviously, this is open to your interpretation on what you find gorgeous. Unlike in other years, this is the first year we also have a group book that you can either choose to read or not read. And it basically casts a confundus charm on the proctors for the exam and confuses them to make them think that the book fits any prompt you want it to. But for this one, I also think it has a gorgeous cover, and so I am going to be picking up on my Kindle Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell, I think is his name. Basically, I think it's another magic school type setting where once you reach a certain age, you're supposed to come into your powers, and our main character doesn't. So he kind of learns to manipulate the world with without having powers. I don't know. It sounds really good. I know Jade over at JD Ray Reads was gushing about these books, and that's why I even purchased it on Kindle, was because she said some really good things about it. So I'm really looking forward to this, and it'll also be fun to have a group read for the whole month to talk with so many different people about. So the next book, or the next prompt for Exceeds Expectations, is to read a comic, a graphic novel, or a manga. And for this, I am going to read Volume 2 of Vampire Knight. It's just going to be a continuation on Volume 1. I think there's 19 volumes total, and I have up to Volume 7. So it'll be interesting to see how the story continues. And again, because it's a manga, I'm hoping to fly through it fairly quickly, but we shall see. So then getting into herbology, the acceptable prompt is to listen to an audiobook. And for this, I have Mystic by, I think it's Jason Denzel, on Audible. So it's the first book in a series, and I just thought the cover was kind of fitting for herbology because it's kind of got like a wood scene, and you've got the mist rolling in. But basically it's a fantasy, I think, about people who can control the mist, and I think it's kind of like a magical mist. I'm not entirely sure about it, but it's always good to have audiobooks, and I'm glad that one of the prompts is actually an audiobook, because I don't know where I would be with having to read physical books for the whole month. So for Exceeds Expectations for herbology, it's to read a book that's between 350 and 390 pages. I have a book that's 351 pages, so it barely squeezes in, but I've got Atonement by Ian McEwan. I was going to read this as my acceptable pick for Care Magical Creatures, but when I had to find a book that would fit within that page range, I had to switch things around a little bit. So that's where Atonement is coming in. It takes place at the start and I believe during World War II, about an English girl who I think has a bit of a love for her sister's significant other, and I think she witnesses something that she shouldn't, so it kind of follows those events and as she grows up a little bit. So it's a book I've been meaning to read for a while just because I would really like to watch the movie, so I think this would be really good, and I'm glad to finally have an opportunity to force myself to read it, I guess you could say, even though I don't feel forced to read it. So those are the 7 books that I plan to read to get my Magizoologist career, honors, N.E.W.T.s, whatever you want to call them. So now I am going to get into the other prompts and other subjects. So first that we skipped over was the outstanding prompt for charms, and this is Spongify, which is a softening charm, and it is to read a paperback. So I plan to pick up the second book in the Fallen Kingdom series, which is Rebel Spring, and this just continues on the events that happen in the first book. We also skipped over Herbology, which is we skipped over the outstanding prompt for Herbology, which is to read a book with a flower on the cover. And this one I plan to read on my Kindle as well, and the book is called Heart of the Fae. I believe the author is Emma Hamm, and I want to say I found out about these books through, oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but I believe his channel name is Captured in Words. I know he's a Canadian YouTuber. I think he's in British Columbia. So he's pretty close to me, but he had mentioned them at some point, and I keep passing over them whenever I look for books on my Kindle, so I figure this would be the perfect time. If I can hit that prompt, then that would be a good pick. So next is Ancient Runes. The acceptable prompt for Ancient Runes is N.E.W.T.s, which is partnership, and this is to read a friend recommendation. I posted a picture on Instagram yesterday recommending some of my favorite books, and 2 people actually commented on that with book recommendations that I think sound really intriguing. So I might pick one of them. But the first recommendation was The Orphan's Tale, which I believe is another World War II based book. And then the other one is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out a Window and Disappeared. And the person who recommended this said it gave them similar feelings and vibes as A Man Called Uva, which is one of the books I had pictured in my Instagram post. I've also been recommended Lilac Girls by my friend Darshell over at Books and Planners. So out of those 3 books, I'm probably going to pick one of those. The Exceeds Expectations prompt for Ancient Runes is to read a book that is written in the past tense. And I have picked Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. I read Ender's Game per Skylar's suggestion a couple years ago, and I bought all the books in the series, but I never finished the series out, so this is just the second book, and I would really like to find out what happens in the rest of the story and where we go from where Ender's Game ended. So I hope I can get to this, and we'll see how it goes if I do. The outstanding prompt for Ancient Runes is to read a book that's been on your TBR for ages. And for this, I have The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Readathon, and this is the first book in a series. I bought this book at my favorite local used bookstore ages and ages and ages ago because of the cover. And at the time, I didn't know what Goodreads was. I didn't know this was the first book in a series. I just, like I said, I picked it up because of the cover. And it's been sitting on my shelves ever since. And it's just always been so intimidating, and I'm not entirely sure why. Because, I mean, it's just under 500 pages. Maybe that's why. But it takes place in Barcelona as the city is healing from war in 1945. Daniel's an antiquarian book dealer's son who mourns the loss of his mother, and he finds solace in a mysterious book entitled The Shadow of the Wind. When he sets out to find the author's other works, he makes a shocking discovery that someone has been systematically destroying every copy of every book Carrick's has written. So Daniel has the last book in existence, and it's basically like a mystery, epic story of murder, madness, and doomed love. And it's always sounded so intriguing, and I don't know why I haven't picked it up, but I really hope to with this readathon. So the next subject is arithmancy. The acceptable prompt is to read a book that ends on an even number, and I plan to pull in another manga for this, which is Vampire Knight Volume 3, again just following the events, I assume, of Volumes 1 and 2. And then the Exceeds Expectations prompt is to read a standalone, and for that I have Metaltown by Kristen Simmons. This is a dystopian steampunk-y kind of book about a girl whose future depends on her family's factory, and she has to be ruthless. She meets some people, and they have to learn that challenging what they thought was true can challenge all the rules. It's an enthralling story of friendship and rebellion. So we'll see how that goes. I picked this up on Book Depository, Book Outlet, because it was pretty inexpensive. And I would like to read it sooner than later to see how I feel about this. The outstanding prompt for arithmancy is to read a book that is longer than 350 pages. I really want to crush through so many series during this readathon. So I have the third book in the Fallen Kingdom series, which is Gathering Darkness, and this one is 407 pages. So pretty chunky, but again, this will be a reread, so hopefully it'll go fairly quickly for me. For astronomy, the first prompt, or the acceptable prompt, is to read a book with a moon on the cover or in the title. And I was going to pick up another book that I have on Audible, which is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Heinlein, I think is his name. I don't know a lot about this, except I think it's about people colonizing the moon. Maybe. I don't exactly remember. I know I picked it up as per a recommendation of one of my colleagues, which I guess could also work as a recommendation from a friend, but it works perfectly for this prompt. The next one is Exceeds Expectations, and that is to read a book with Night in the title or series name. And I don't know if this counts or if it's a stretch, but I was planning to pick up Vampire Knight Volume 4, because technically if you take away the K, Night is in the title, and it's about a night class. So I don't know if it works, but nobody is going to be police in the TBRs, and I'm not entirely sure if I'll even be able to get to this, so that's going to be my pick. And then for the outstanding prompt, it's to read a sci-fi book or a book with a star on the cover. And for this, I was going to pick up another audiobook that I have on Audible, which is called Children of Time by, is it Adrian Tchaikovsky, I think is his name. I know it's the first book in a series, and what I know about it is that there are giant spiders on the moon or a planet or something like that. I don't know too much about it. I'm not super fond of spiders, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna like reading about giant spiders. I think they're even robot spiders, but we'll see. And it's been on my TBR for a while, so I feel like I should get to it fairly soon. So now moving into Defense Against the Dark Arts, we have the acceptable prompt of a book with a black cover under the dust jacket. And oh boy, did I have such a hard time finding a book to fit this prompt. This is actually a book I had to switch around from another prompt. And honestly, the majority of my books are paperbacks, and I think I had like 4 books total out of probably close to 300 books that actually had a black hard cover under the dust jacket, and this was the only one I was ready to get to. But it is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire, and this is the 3rd book in the Wayward Children series. This one follows Hugo and Nebula. Oh no, it was in. Never mind. It follows Rini, and I think this is, it's not, I know there's Logic Worlds, and I don't remember what the other ones are called, but I think it's another one, kind of world. It's not a Logic World. So it's basically about their story. And that's all I really know. These are really short, so I don't need to know a whole lot before going into them because I don't want the whole story to be spoiled. But I am looking forward to moving forward with this series. The next prompt is Exceeds Expectation, and this is in homage. I never know how to say that word. But to Gilderoy's one and only shining moments, basically, even though he was a Ravenclaw, and I don't know why. But he is amazingly good at memory charms when wands don't backfire on him. So this is a prompt of to read the first book that comes to mind. And I struggled with this one a bit because when I watched G's announcement video, I wasn't ready to write anything down, even though she really did prep us to write something down, but I wasn't in that headspace to like actually think about a book and write it down. And I really didn't. I just mostly thought about my bookshelves. So I rewatched her video last night, and the first book that came to mind upon rewatch was The Painted Girls by Kathy Marie Buchanan. So this is a historical fiction story that follows the lives of 2 sisters after their father passes away, and their mother's small amount of wages as a laundress keep disappearing into an absinthe bottle. One of the sisters is dispatched into the Paris Opera, where she's trained in ballet, and then the other sister finds work and the love of a dangerous young man. And then it's basically about the lives of the 2 girls as Marie throws herself into dance and is soon modeling in a studio of Edgar Degas. And then her sister Antoinette descends lower and lower in society and must make the choice between a life of honest labor and the more profitable avenue open to a young woman of the Parisian demi-monde. So we'll see how it goes. I like historical fiction, but this book just hasn't been drawing me towards it for a while, so I am excited to finally read it here soon and see what it's all about. The outstanding prompt for Defense Against the Dark Arts is all about Cornish pixies, and it's basically to read a book by an English author or set in England, and I'm so gonna butcher this word, but what I plan to listen to on audiobook through my library is on Chesil Beach. I watched the movie for this on my flight back from Scotland, maybe. Was it 2 years ago? 3 years ago? However long ago. And it's a movie that has Saoirse Ronan in it. That's what I know about it. She and this young boy fall in love, but she is not ready to take the marriage to the step of consummating it, so she ends up leaving, and she really wants to pursue a life in music. So it's kind of about their courting and their engagement, their marriage, up until the point of her leaving her brand new husband, and then it comes back years later with where the both of them are. I really enjoyed the movie. I really like Saoirse Ronan, so I think it would be good to go back and read the book. So the next subject we come to is divination, and the acceptable prompt for divination is to read a white book. And for this, I have planned to read Pacifica by Kristen Simmons. And this is pretty light on the cover as it is, but it also is just plain white hardcover, so that works perfectly for me. Then we come to a short story or collection of short stories. G said you only had to read one short story within the collection, and that counts, but I plan to read the entirety of Summer Days and Summer Nights, which is edited by Stephanie Perkins. I have this on my Kindle, and I meant to read it during the Summerathon in June, but I never got around to it. And then the outstanding prompt is to read the last book that you purchased, and I did a book haul that will go up actually after this video, so spoiler for that, but I picked up Beowulf, which is an epic poem about the what is he? Beowulf. Like, he's a military guy. What does he do? He does things. But it's just an old English poem about survival from the Anglo-Saxon period. I tried listening to this on audiobook one time, and I really don't recommend that, so I think reading it as a physical book will be a lot easier, and it should be pretty quick to get to, as it's a fairly thin book, and it's just under like 170 pages. So now into History of Magic. The acceptable prompt is to read a fantasy, and for this I have another Audible pick. It's The Girl with Fire and Thorns. This is a fantasy book. I read the synopsis last night and I'm already blanking on what it's about, but I know it's the first book in a series, so I want to see how I like this, and then maybe get more of the books and listen to them or read them later in the year. And then for Exceeds Expectations, it's to pick a book with a map, and I have another Fallen Kingdoms book. This is book 4, and in the front it has a map, if I can get to the proper page. I've got one there. This is up to where I stopped in the series, so again, this reread should be pretty easy, with it being young adult fantasy, and me knowing the story already. So we'll see how that goes. Then the outstanding prompt for History of Magic is to reread a favorite book or to read a classic. I'm trying really hard to get through like a significant number of my books that I own physically that I haven't read yet, so I don't really want to do rereads this year. I have done like 2 rereads, but I don't really want to do much more than that. So a recent classic that you will also see in my haul that I picked up is Candide by Voltaire. And this is a satirical classic following Candide, who just gets into some shenanigans and things. There's quite a few illustrations in this book. And again, this book is under 150 pages, so it should be pretty quick. We'll see how that goes. All right, so now into the home stretch, we have 3 subjects left. So we come into Muggle Studies, and the acceptable prompt is to read a book with a photo element on the cover. So it would be something like Adrift actually is a photo. It's got like a boat and things like that, versus, spoiler for my next prompt, Little Women, which is an illustration. I am planning to read Twin Peaks, the final, is it dossier or dossier? I'm not entirely sure. But I also have this on Audible, and it's like a 3-hour long audiobook, so it'll be really quick. Skylar actually introduced me to Twin Peaks last year, or it must have been the year before. And I really like the show. It takes place at this hotel atop Snoqualmie Falls, which is in Washington. It's in the Central Cascades. And on the cover of this book, it's got the hotel and Snoqualmie Falls. I think it's the Slalish, or I can't remember the name of the hotel, but that is the one that I plan to pick. And then for Exceeds Expectations, it is to read a book set in the real world. So I am picking up Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is a classic, and it takes place in, is it the, I can never remember, the South or the East Coast during, is it the Civil War? It's something. It's a classic I've never read though, and as I mentioned before, I really like Saoirse Ronan, and I know she is going to be in the newest Little Women adaptation that I believe comes out December of this year. It also has Emma Watson in it, so I would really like to read this story and then watch the newest adaptation, because those are 2 actresses that I do really enjoy. And then for the outstanding prompt of Muggle Studies, it is to read a book written by a person of color, and I am planning to read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Alice Walker was a Black American woman, and this follows 2 sisters. One is a missionary in Africa, and the other is a child wife living in the South. So it's about how they maintain their loyalty and love with each other over time and distance and things like that. So for potions, I haven't picked anything for the acceptable prompt yet, which is to read a friend's favorite book. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to pick up yet. I know G compiled a list of people's favorites from the Owls, and I know Orange Volume 1 was on there, which I have right here. So since I've got quite a few other mangas to get comfortable with the formatting of, I might pick up Orange. It's a little bit chunkier though, because it is the first complete collection, and there's 2 of them. So we'll see about this, but it is about a group of kids. A girl gets a letter from her future self letting her know that if they don't change certain events, a classmate of hers is going to commit suicide, I think is what it is. Or he won't be with them any longer, I think is what the letter says. I've heard this is pretty hard hitting, and it does talk about suicide and depression and things like that. So it should be pretty decent, and I just think a good story all around. So I might pick that up, or if anybody else wants to recommend a favorite, please do let me know down in the comments, and I will look at maybe reading that. The Exceeds Expectations prompt is to read a book in your house colors or with colors on the cover that are for your Hogwarts house. I'm a Ravenclaw, so I picked Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo because it's got the blues mixed in, and for movie tie-in it's got silvers. Also it's got gold, which is kind of bronze-y looking for book cover colors. And this is the first book in the Grishaverse. I don't know a whole lot about it other than I bought these because of the hype around Six of Crows, and I know a lot of people recommend that if you want like the full knowledge of the Grisha verse, to read the trilogy before you go into the duology. So I would like to read these so that I can get to Six of Crows soon, because it seems like some really decent books that a lot of people hype up and recommend. So next prompt is Outstanding, and that's to read a book that starts with a prologue. I'm sure most of these books do, but I am pulling up another Fallen Kingdoms book, and this is book 5, which is Crystal Storm. It starts with a prologue. Like I said, I read up to book 4, so book 5 might go a little slower since I'm not familiar with the story that's in this book yet, but I don't know, maybe this readathon I'll be able to complete a whole series, which would be really cool. We'll see how that goes though, but again, it's just going to be a continuation of where the 4th book left off. Next course is Transfiguration, which is to I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting really tired of filming, which is why. So Transfiguration, the acceptable prompt is to read a book with LGBTQA plus representation in it. And for this, depending on where I am in the series, I am either going to read Clockwork Prince, Clockwork Princess, or the 4th book in The Mortal Instruments, which all of them do have LGBTQA plus representation in them. I'm just not sure which one I'll be on by that point. And then for Exceeds Expectation, the prompt is to read a book that is not the first in the series, and I was going to continue on with another series that I have started, which is Lyrial by Garth Nix. This is the 2nd book in the series, and it follows along 100 or so years after the events of Sabriel, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but this is a series that Skylar bought for me for my birthday a couple years ago that I read the 1st book on, and I liked it, but I just never picked up the 2nd one, so I'd really like to finish this year. And then the outstanding prompt for Transfiguration is because McGonagall does not mess around, so this is to read a tome or a book over 500 pages, and I have picked Aborzen by Garth Nix, which is the 3rd book in the Old Kingdom. What is it? That might be the name of the series. I think it's also called Sabriel. So yeah, we'll see if I can wrap up another series. I'm not entirely sure. But those are 34 books that I plan to potentially read in the month of August. 7 of them for sure. And then I'm still just waiting for either a friend recommendation or a friend's favorite book recommendation. So if you have anything that you want to leave in the comments down below, please do let me know. I would also love to know if you're participating in the N.E.W.T.s. If you are, what career are you pursuing, and are we reading any of the same books, or have you read any of these books? I'd love to chat with you about anything and everything down in the comments below. So if you would like, please leave something down there and I will chat with you in the comments. Until my next video, bye!